The evidence behind Palkia and Dialga's plan to overthrow Arceus can be first found within their Origin Forms Dex entries, where they're actually stated to be just a simple and incomplete imitation of their own creator.
Palkia's body transforms into a centaur-like form that crudely imitates Arceus' own. I mean, it even has a part of Arceus' ring forming around its own midsection. Dialga's body similarly shifts to become more like Arceus, with the other part of its halo forming around their midsection as well. Neither of the two look like they're complete. But these forms don't just change them aesthetically, you know. Their origin forms also change the way their signature moves function in the first place. Let's take a look at Palkia. Its signature move is Spatial Rend, where it uses its arms to cleave through space to attack its opponents. Now let's look at its origin form. Do you see the problem here? The body part that allows it to manipulate space effectively, its arms, are gone. This change is also reflected in its signature move statistics, with it not only losing power, but also accuracy. Of course, there is a similar case found in Dialga's signature move. Roar of Time normally has a base power of 120 and an accuracy of 90%, but when it's used in its origin form, it becomes stronger as well as faster. However, it also gets a severe drop in accuracy, falling a whole 15%. Dialga's origin form also reflects that change. It gains some sort of throat nodule that's constantly filled with the same sort of power that Roar of Time expels.
Its form also gains a mask,
but for Dialga, it's nothing but a hindrance. It's almost as if the two dragons were designed with flaws in mind, because, let's be honest here, Arceus certainly has the power to, at the very least, give Palkia a pair of arms. And so, I believe that the two creation dragons realized this. Those feelings of being incomplete, as well as controlled, fueled their envy to a point where a decision between the two was made. They wanted to live for themselves, and so they devised a plan to do just that. Over 20,000 years ago, there was a gigantic asteroid, which is implied by Peonia to have fallen into the Crown Tundra. The impact created a cavern that's known to us as the Max Lair, a place severely dangerous to the health of any Pokemon who dare enter. Inside of this meteorite slumbered Eternatus, the Pokemon who I think Palkia and Dialga created as a way to topple Arceus' own rule. But why would I think that? Well, there's quite a bit of evidence to support their connection. Within Eternamax's Eternatus' Pokedex entry, we can read an interesting piece of lore. It states the following: infinite amounts of energy pour from this Pokemon's enlarged core, warping the surrounding space-time. There are two things I would like you to look at here. Let's start with the obvious: Eternatus' ability to warp the surrounding space, as well as time. Those two are quite obviously the domains that Palkia and Dialga rule over, and we can see this ability being used during our fight with its Eternamax form. In the back of the arena, we can see warping images of various locations across the Galar region, and upon closer inspections, we can also see that these visions suspiciously reflect the areas we journeyed through during the gym challenge. There is Balonlea, Hulbury City, and it even shows us the Diglett statues we found on Route 6. Of course, there is also Eternatus' wormhole, the one through which its giant arm originates from. Both of the two creation dragons have realms of their own, just like Giratina does with its distortion world. The portals we can see them emerge from are quite similar to that of Eternatus's. In the case for Eternatus, I strongly believe that these two dragons gave Eternatus the power to travel freely between either of the two realms, as well as, at least slightly, control the domains they ruled over. But that's not all that reinforces this theory. Let's take a look at the second chunk of text in its Dex entry. Infinite amounts of energy pour from this Pokemon's enlarged core. The core that holds this legendary's power is almost identical to the ones that Palkia dons on both of its shoulders, the ones that glow during its spatial manipulation. Then there is Dialga, who's commonly associated with crystals and metals. If you take a look at Eternatus' chassis, the body which allows for both of its defensive stats to reach 250 during its Eternamax state, it's pretty easy to see how the only thing that would allow it to withstand such attacks would have to be the metals forged from the Pokemon that wields time itself. Speaking of its Eternamax form, notice how it resembles that of a giant arm? Well, in Arceus' Pokedex entry, we can read about how it shaped the universe with its 1,000 arms. So really, the two creation dragons, once again, in a mock attempt to become Arceus, created their own world-shaping arm. an abomination that resembled the very opposite of the smooth and regal lifeforms Arceus created during the dawn of the universe. Now, with that out of the way, let's get back to the myth of Galar's darkest day. 17,000 years after the meteorite landed in the Crown Tundra, the slumbering dragon within awoke, causing a massive black storm to engulf the entire region. Galar particles radiated from Eternatus, forcing wild Pokemon to Dynamax uncontrollably. Not only are these particles known to be toxic to Arceus' creations, they also make them go berserk, laying ruin to everything around themselves. However, not all was lost. Arceus saw the immense danger that this creature posed to the safety of its universe, but it also knew that it could not intervene by itself. It needed to keep the cosmic balance. So what it did instead is create two legendary Pokemon, and either unconsciously, or perhaps angered by the lack of loyalty its original creations showed, it shaped them in the form of a wolf. And by the way, we do know that these two wolves weren't native to the Galar region either, as according to Sonia, they were born somewhere beyond the slumbering world a long time ago. Sure, that doesn't prove that either of them are Arceus' direct creations, but the fact that they're able to completely shrug off the effects of Eternatus' Galar particles, as evidenced by their inability to Dynamax, as well as their signature moves doing twice as much damage against those who are influenced by its power, proves that, at the very least, it was designed with the destruction of Eternatus in mind. But you know, these warrior Pokemon, they weren't alone. Galar's legends also tell us of a pair of brothers who fought alongside them. These two human youths were very likely to have also been bestowed with powers, one of which being longer lifespans. The evidence behind that idea will be explained later on, so don't worry about it for now. Alongside Zacian and Zamazenta, the brothers were able to seal away Eternatus. Not slaying it, no. Erasing a being that's able to bend the universe's matter, as well as its time, isn't something that could simply just be erased. Palkia and Dialga were, of course, furious. The plan they spent the last 17,000 years meticulously creating was foiled not even by Arceus, but by its two avatars, and a pair of mortal men. They wouldn't forget the actions those two humans had taken against them. Palkia and Dialga would have their revenge, but again, that's something I can only expand on later in the video. While Arceus' four heroes successfully stopped the Darkest Day from destroying Galar, the two legendary beasts had depleted all of their energy and thus turned to stone. While the two wolves slumbered, the brothers were crowned as kings, dethroning Galar's ancient ruler, Calyrex. Calyrex actually also played a rather large part during the events of Eternatus' creation 20,000 years ago. In its text entry, we can read about how it used its powers to see all events from past to future in order to save the creatures living in a large forest. It did so by teleporting that forest and all the Pokemon living there to a different location overnight. The question here is though, what forest was it? There are two possible candidates in my eyes. One is the Slumbering World, the other is Glimwood Tangle. Both use the same Japanese word for forest, and that name for forest is also used in its text entry. But that's not a lot of evidence. If you've got some other pieces, or maybe even the answer to this, then I'd appreciate it if you could tell me in the comment section below. And hey, if you do want to help support these theories, then consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It's these small actions that allow me to spend most of my day working on improving the quality of these videos. I really appreciate it. Let me show you a little problem that arises inside of the Galarian legends. The myths that recorded the Darkest Day tell the story of only one king. A king who wielded not Pokemon, but a physical sword and shield. But why is that? Well, if you're versed in Pokemon lore, then you probably remember that quite a few other events happened 3,000 years ago as well, with the War of Kalos probably being the most well-known of the bunch. What I firmly believe happened to the two Galarian kings is that they were sent on another mission by Arceus, and that was to settle in a region far away from the warring European continent, the region we now know as Unova. The evidence for that? That's actually found in the myths present there. 3,000 years ago, the inhabitants of ancient Unova were under a constant state of war with one another. However, two heroic brothers united the people as one nation. They denounced the evils of truth and love, and they also extended their reach to the stars above. There's quite a bit of evidence that points towards these Unovan brothers being the same as the Galarian ones. First off, the concept of kings is something that originates from mainland Europe. To have a whole nother continent perform the same same tradition seems, well, strange to say the least. There's even evidence found within the modern times as well. The location in which we discover the statues of the two Galarian kings is known as Stoonside. This town in the Galar region bears an extremely heavy resemblance to Lentimas town in the Unova region. They're both desert towns surrounded by mountains, and they also have architecture reminiscent of Spanish colonialism and Native American styles. Of course, that isn't all the proof that Galar originally colonized Unova. Trade with the settlers of Unova and citizens of Galar must have flourished. The Pokemon we find in Galar prove this to be true, as we not only find Galarian Darmanitans, a Pokemon native to Unova, but also Galarian Stunfisk. These two Pokemon weren't just recently introduced to the Galarian ecosystem either, otherwise they wouldn't have adapted to their new environments already. With that in mind, we can continue with the mythology passed down through Unova's legends. The two brothers were crowned as kings after they united the people, but what I failed to mention was how they performed such a miraculous feat. The myths tell us of a being called the Original Dragon, who aided the brothers in quelling the war between the warring tribes of the land. But there was never an explanation on how the brothers got their hands on a dragon powerful enough to even perform such a feat, and for that, I've got an explanation. If you've watched some of my videos before, then you probably remember the video in which I theorized the existence of there being another creation dragon, that being the Original Dragon. I won't bring up the evidence for that here again, but feel free to watch the video if you haven't already. It's not like I'll continue this one without you.
What I theorized to have happened these 3,000 years ago was that Arceus bestowed this newly made dragon upon the two brothers. But hold on a minute, what even is a creation dragon? In simple terms, it's a being that Arceus created in order to embody a specific aspect found in its universe. Palkia stabilized the space with each breath it took, while Dialga's birth was said to have started the movement of time. Did you notice how both of these Pokemon not only controlled their specific domain, but also made sure that it functions in a way that benefits life? That's why I think it would make sense for Arceus to create this fourth member much later than the others. Eternatus' Darkest Day, as well as AZ's ultimate weapon, destabilized the energy of the world to a point where Arceus had no other choice but to create another dragon that actively worked towards stabilizing this rogue energy, something which we might see get expanded on with the upcoming release of ZA's Rogue Mega Evolutions.
If you remember what I said earlier though, then you know that Palkia and Dialga didn't take this insult lightly, but they had to bide their time. They couldn't risk angering Arceus further, they had to make their revenge seem like it happened naturally. After Unova was united, it was at peace. The brothers even built a palace to the east of current-day Andela town, a location, mind you, that's also very close to Lentimas town. The peace they created was short-lived, however, because as time went on, their views started to differ. The elder brother sought to pursue the truth of this world, while the younger brother believed that they should follow humanity's ideals instead. Eventually, the conflict escalated to the point where their dragon could no longer fulfill its duty to guard either of the two, and thus it only had one option left. It split itself in two. Reshiram became the enforcer of truth, while Zekrom became the holder of ideals. With that, one of the two brothers left the palace in anger and built his own far away. This place was later dubbed the Relic Castle due to it being covered in deep layers of sand. Now, this is where I can finally explain the previous mentioning of their elongated lifespans. The first palace off of the coast of Andela town was constructed by Unova's kings approximately 3,000 years ago, which makes sense since that's also around the same time when the two brothers in Galar defeated Eternatus during the Darkest Day. But the Relic Castle was built latest 2,500 years ago, with both of the two locations' mythology vehemently stating that one of the two brothers built either one of the two palaces. And so, the best possible explanation here is that the two of them have a much longer than average lifespan. Anyway, from that point onward, the two brothers continued to wage war, with neither being able to prevail over the other. But the conflict did leave their dragons weakened, and with them now being unable to protect either of the two kings effectively, it gave Palkia and Dialga the perfect opportunity to exact their revenge. The two creation dragons had to be careful, however, as Arceus still seemed to be connected to the two brothers, evidenced by the abyssal ruins holding all of Arceus's plates. The palace located near Andela town is also named the Abyssal Ruins, and that's due to it being swallowed by the depths of the ocean. This was the place that Palkia chose to target. Giant tidal waves struck the city, and while the king managed to rescue all of his people, he presumably lost his life in the process. The city he built became his tomb. How do we know that it was Palkia's fault though? Well, not only is its secondary typing water, it's also obviously able to manipulate space. So giant tidal waves aren't really that complicated. What about the other castle though? Well, it was buried in sand by Dialga. This one's also pretty easy to explain. The metaphor of time being compared to flowing sand very easily fits with the map's description of the relic castle. Ancient ruins with a glorious history, buried in the sand as time went by. And thus, both brothers as well as Dragon now lie buried underneath the empire they built together. Well, until our near history, where they were discovered by an organization led by someone who bears the same abilities to talk to Pokemon, as well as the last name of Unova's ancient kings.